I'd like to acknowledge that we are meeting here today on the traditional land of the Brayakalung people of the Gunai-Kurnai Nation, and I pay respect to their past and present elders. Welcome everybody to our Men's Health Week special presentation with author and podcaster Joe Bakhmoutski. We're going to hear Joe talk about his own journey with cancer and find out what men and the women and friends in their lives can do to support their own health, both physical and mental. So Joe, tell me a little bit about you and how you came to do what you are doing.
Yeah, Vicky, thanks so much for having me. It's truly an honor to speak to you today. Like you said, my name is Joe Bakhmoutski. I'm the host of the Simplify Cancer podcast. I'm now proud author of Finding Hope in Times of Uncertainty, a guide to thriving in the challenging world of today. And I'm just honored to speak about men's health because of my own experiences of going through cancer, but also living with anxiety for most of my life. So I know how tough that can be for men and for those who love them. So it's so crucial to talk about many myths and misconceptions and what we can do better to tackle men's health. And I want to quickly talk about what I feel is one of the myths about men's health. And that is, I really believe that we have this myth, I think, in our culture that us guys cannot talk about, cannot express our emotions. Now, I think that was true. That was true 30 years ago. That may have been even true 20 years ago. I think that to a certain extent, it may have been true a decade ago, but I don't believe that is true today. I believe that by speaking with thousands of men in support groups, speaking with, in online, speaking with men in hospitals and their caregivers as well. I really believe that the biggest challenge, I think us men of different ages, of different stages in life, we can talk about things that are personal, especially when we feel that we're not being judged in an open environment. But I feel it's that what really gets in the way is not being able to make sense of these huge things that hit us, whether that's cancer, whether that's mental health, whether that's losing your home, whether that's having a tough time in your business. We struggle to make sense of those big turning points in life. And when we struggle to make sense of it internally to ourselves, it's very difficult to talk about it. And I know for me, I guess how it it all came about is, I was I had cancer and haven't had mental health issues. I think it's been a process that I went through to make sense of it all, and hopefully we can touch on that as well today.
Yes, you mentioned the personal aspect and making sense of things. So when you received your diagnosis, how did that affect you and your way of life? Perhaps you can talk a bit about that.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, Vicky, I was just a few years ago, I was really at the best point of my life. I met the woman who's the love of my life. We have our son who's 2 years old. We just bought a house together. I changed careers. I was just working in the university, doing something that I love. I was just really having fun with it. And and I was like, life was good. And I was just at home. I was just in the shower one night, just getting myself clean until like my hand reached down and I felt this lump. I felt this lump on my testicle. And that's when like this cold shudder just went right through me, Vicky. Like, it's because in that instant I realized why for weeks I felt like my underwear just shrunk several sizes. I realized like why for weeks I felt like I couldn't get to sleep properly. I just kept tossing and turning. I just couldn't get to feel myself properly. So the next day I raced to the doctors, and that was probably something that saved my life. And that's what I hugely, by the way, advocate for, that to go and get yourself checked out at the first sign of trouble. Because, you know, on one hand, you might be able to just get on things early and get really on top of it. And on the other hand, you know, if it's nothing, that you're able to save yourself a whole lot of worry, and you're able to just have the peace of mind that everything's okay. So, you know, for me, like I said, when I went to the doctors, I was sent for tests, and things happened quite quickly. And before I knew it, I just kind of found myself in the urologist office. I remember he did this thorough examination of my chest and abdominals and my testicles. And I didn't know that at the time. I guess I had no idea what was happening at the time. But that's, I guess, one of the good things about testicular cancer is it has a predictable way that it travels up. So he did this thorough examination. He asked me to get up, and he said, "Have a seat." And I'll never forget, Vicky, how he sat down opposite me, and he said, "Joe, I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but this is definitely cancer." And at that point, I just felt like everything stopped. I felt like I was like just dropped into this water tank, you know. I could kind of see things, but it was all kind of murky, you know, and I could hear stuff, but it was all kind of muffled. You know, he was saying something about the operation, and he was talking about some oncologist he recommends, but it didn't really connect with me. And I remember walking out of his rooms. They gave me all the stuff to do, you know, more paperwork, to do more tests, and for the hospital. And I remember just standing outside there, just thinking, like, you know, why me? You know, what have I done to deserve this? I've been a good person. You know, I always knew that cancer was a thing, but I've always thought it was something that happens to other people. I never thought it was something that would happen to me. And why now, when things are finally seem to be falling into place in my life? And does this mean that I'm going to die? But I haven't even done what it is supposed to be doing in life. And I don't even know what that is. Just know I haven't done it yet. And let's just say that, you know, if I do go through all of this treatment, you know, this operation, this chemotherapy, it all sounds pretty intense. And there's no really guarantee that it's all going to work anyway. But if it does, will I still be able to work? Will I still be able to spend time with my family? Will I still be able to do stuff around the house? Will I be able to have sex? You know, these are all the questions that go through your mind as a cancer patient, or really with any trouble that you run into in life, because you start to get, I think especially for us guys, we start to get in our heads and get all of these worries, all of these concerns that just, that seems to be boiling around in your mind. And it's hard, and it's not easy to get them out. And I also believe that, you know, some people say, you know, I won't let cancer define me. But I always say, how can it not? Whether it's cancer, whether it's something big in your life, it's going to have a profound impact. But I do believe it's about the choice that we have, the choice whether to close in and go in kind of within yourself, or whether this becomes something that emboldens you to open up, to be more connected with people around you, to, you know, be a greater part of your community. And I think that's so vital, Vicky, for all of us to be moving forward.
That's right. You described that as an intensely personal moment. It's almost like you went into a kind of shock when you received that diagnosis, which is understandable. But what about the people in your life? How did your diagnosis impact the other people who were close to you?
Yes, absolutely, Vicky. And I think the cancer has a tremendous burden on the caregiver. And when I say caregiver, I really mean just anyone who cares about you. You know, it throws their life, you know, up in there, because, you know, when you are going through cancer or something else, you're kind of trying to deal with it as best you can. But the people who truly care about you, it's so tough for them to make sense of what is going on. And I really believe that that's why support is so vital to us when it comes both ways, you know, both for the person going through a difficult time, but also, you know, for the caregiver. And that's why I believe there's some key obstacles that we have that come up in getting that support on your terms. And I want to talk to like the three big obstacles that I believe come up when it's you know, when we talk about getting support that you really want on your terms. And the first one, and I think this is especially a big one for us guys, is that you don't want to be a burden. And that makes sense, right? We don't want to be able to make life more stressful. We don't want to make it more difficult for the people that we care about the most. But I really believe, like, from my personal experience, I remember the time, Vicky, when you know, when I've had my operation, I was about to, you know, to go and start chemo. I knew it was gonna, you know, last 9 weeks. I was gonna be away from the home for a long time. So I just wanted to spend some great time with my son. And I spent a whole day with him. And he was 2 years old at the time. And I took him to our favorite park. You know, it was just a beautiful day. Like, the sun was shining, and he was running around this lake chasing the seagulls and ducks, and we were all over the playground, and we had this picnic with us, right? We had this cheese and crackers and sultanas. And he was into these toy cars as well. So this is the playing with these, you know, toy cars. And I remember Vicky just sitting under this like huge palm tree. And I remember thinking, what can I tell my son about my cancer? I mean, he's just a kid, right? Like, I don't want to scare him or make it weird. So we didn't really end up telling him much. We just said, you know, doctors are going to look after me. And so I went to the hospital, and every day my wife and my son would talk on Skype. And one day I noticed this strange look in his eyes. It's kind of like he knew that something was wrong, but he didn't know what it was. It's like us adults were keeping secrets from him. And, you know, when I saw that look of just not understanding in his eyes, I knew that by wanting to shield my son from my cancer, I realized that I excluded him. And that's when we knew things had to change. We talked about it, and we actually sat him down and explained how everything was and what could happen. And to my surprise, he took it well. But it kind of makes sense to me now, because when you have a person in your life who is going through a difficult time, but you don't know what that is, like, you know, something is really is difficult for them, right? But you don't know what is going on. It's so hard. And that's why it's so vital for us to bring people in and make them part of your life, you know, because I guess, you know, when you're going through a difficult time, most people want to help you, and they will really want to be there for you and support you, but they don't really know how. And I really believe that it's up to us to guide them. I really believe it's so important to be able to, you know, to guide them in a very specific way, as specific as possible. You know, I guess if I could go back in time, I guess maybe I would have sent an email to people in my life, something along the lines of, you know, I'm going through this type of treatment. Things are pretty crazy right now. If you feel like supporting us with and do any of the following, and I would list things like, you know, buying groceries, doing babysitting, a few other things, please feel free to, you know, reply and let us know. And that makes it easier for people because they can pick and choose how they might be able to help you. It makes it also easier for them to, well, if they don't feel like doing anything, but also for yourself, it helps to prevent the support that you don't want, all right? Because it's also important to do it in a way that is right for you. So I really believe that not wanting to be a burden, that really it's not going to be a burden when people know what's going on and we guide them into how they want to be there for us. I think the second biggest obstacle, I really believe, is is that if the first one was really about not wanting to make other people feel awkward or weird, I think the second one, and that's true for us guys as well, is not wanting to feel weird ourselves. I remember when I got diagnosed with cancer, I remember a neighbor of ours was saying, "Oh, Joe, this is so terrible. Like, it happens to someone at such a young age." I mean, he made it sound as if I was going to die. And I could have, but it's just, I didn't want to feel like have someone feel sorry for you in that way. So I think part of us wants to prevent that. And I think for me, one thing that I've realized is, and I think this was when I was in the hospital, and we had this moment, Vicky, when a time came for my son's kind of third birthday, and we were kind of celebrating it in the oncology ward because that's where I was, and we had cake and presents, and we had our oncology nurses with us. And I remember all of us sitting there singing happy birthday for him. I remember looking at him, just hugging this giant like Hulk figurine he got for his birthday, and he had this massive grin all over his face. And I remember looking at him and thinking, that's when cancer has become normal. And in a way, it helped me to internalize it as well and help me to talk about it with other people and make it a part of our life. It gave me freedom to not only talk to people about cancer, but also to talk to them about things that had nothing to do with cancer, but just kind of acknowledging that it was there. And I really believe that that's a huge part of what I noticed, how people started responding, because it was something that I was okay with myself. People responded to it in a way that made me feel good about it. Those weird and strange things didn't come up and didn't bother me. And I think that made a huge difference. I think when we start to ourselves to be open about our challenges, people around us respond to it in a powerful way. And really then the third obstacle that I really believe is so critical, Vicky, and I think this is really true of us guys, is when we think that we are handling it. When are you really? For me, I remember when I was in hospital, and I just remember that I had a few people in my life just a few friends who kind of went missing during that point of my life. And I remember feeling really lonely, and it really cut to me just on a personal level. And it's something that I had trouble dealing with for months. And I remember even coming back home from the hospital, I probably wasn't the best person to be around, because all of these worries and concerns and like would just get into me. And I remember just one night, I was out on a walk, and I was walking around, and I was just like saying, like, why is this happening? I mean, have I been a bad friend? I was just talking through things out loud. And what I realized, I started talking through things, and all of these things started to come up that I've never even considered for the longest time. Like, like for example, that with some people, we're growing apart. and I didn't notice it because everyone was so busy. And it took something as big as cancer to really bring it to light. And when I realized that talking through things out loud, I started doing it more and more and more, just like asking myself questions and then really being able to answer them. It really brought up all sorts of things that I've never even expected. And that's what I believe is so crucial for us to be able to do, because it's safe when you talk through things out loud. It's now something I highly recommend to people I work with. Talk through things out loud. And I recommend spending 5 minutes a day, whether you're on a drive or you're doing something that you already want to be doing, to be able to talk through things out loud is different sometimes to thinking things through, because we can go off on a tangent. It's also sometimes different because sometimes we can it's different to writing things down, because we have to make sense of things when we talk through things out loud. And so I really believe that can make a big difference. And when we're able to make a difference of something that is inside of us, and we can be able to connect the dots, when we're able to find explanations for things, then we can start to talk about it. I remember coming home and my wife said, "How are you going?" I said, "You know what? Like, I'm angry." And she said, "Why?" I said, "This is what happened." And so we were just able to have a conversation about something that I was able to talk about, because I've already been able to make sense of it to myself. And that's what helps it to kind of bring it out as well,
So I imagine it's a time of tremendous turmoil and uncertainty. You've touched on that a little bit. You've also touched on how you may have, with the benefit of hindsight, approached your sort of early days differently, asking people to be very specific in the things that they do. Can you tell us a little bit about what actually did help you through that really stressful and uncertain time? Anything very specific that you can offer to people?
Yeah, absolutely, Vicky. I think one of the things that I remember feeling so helpless, like I didn't know what was going on. And I remember just going through this process every morning of trying to separate what I cannot control from the things that I can, and being able to focus on it. And it's something that would really take about 1 minute, but and it's an exercise that I call the line of control. And I want to quickly do it with you now. And it's just a visualization exercise. So I'm not going to ask you to do anything weird. But I would like to ask you to do is to imagine that there's a line going out from your forehead, extending the world ahead of you in 2 equal halves. And what I want you to do now, if you can, is to imagine things that you cannot change or influence or control. Things that might be bothering you, might be frustrating you, might be making life difficult. I want you to think of something like that. Think of it, grab it, and put it to the left. Again, there could be things that are worries, frustrations, that are difficult. But again, we cannot influence them or change them in any way. So think of it, grab it, put it to the left. It might be something to do, with the pandemic. It might be something to do with the economy. It might be something to do with natural disasters. And something that is specific to you and your way of life. Like, I don't know what your boss said to you last week. I don't know what the neighbors are doing, right? So think of it, grab it, put it to the left. Now let's remember we've got the line of control right here in the middle. And now let's switch our focus to the right. And now if you can, please think of things that you can't control, or at least be able to influence in some way. And these could be things that might be helpful, might be supportive, maybe that you like doing. Again, think of it, grab it, put it to the right. Now, I know for me, it's looking after my health. It's, getting, my regular checkups to see if the cancers come back. For me, it's, eating more or less well. For me, it's doing exercises. For me, it's how I show up for my family. For me, it's what I do in my work, right? So maybe you've got, 2 or 3 things there as well that maybe you do regular. Maybe it's how you think about things. Maybe it's how you approach things. So hopefully you got something like that as well. Now let's remember we've got the line of control separating these 2 halves. And what I would like you to try and do now is to imagine that those things that we talked about, that we cannot control, influence, or change, things that might be difficult or frustrating or hard. Imagine that in your mind, you're going to move all of them to the side. You're going to just move them out of the way to the place where they're no longer running your life. Because the truth is, right, we know that those things are not going to disappear. We know that those things are not going to go away. But you know what? We know exactly what they are. And once we are able to call them out and able to move them to a place where it's no longer running our lives, it is then that we can turn our focus, turn our attention to the right, to the things that we can control, or at least influence in some way, towards the things that are up to us, towards the things that make us feel good, that make you feel excited, that make you feel better about yourself and the world around you. Because what happens in a time of crisis? What happens in a time of uncertainty? Well, you feel like nothing is up to you. And that's why it's so vital to separate what you cannot control from the things that you can, and direct your energy and your time towards the things that you can. I hope that's helpful.
That's a brilliant exercise to do and simple for everybody to visualize. So that's something that you, as the person who's taking on the challenge, can do. But what about the support team around you? You touched on that a little bit earlier, but what are some of the things that your friends, family, and loved ones can actually do to make a difference in the life of somebody who's going through, whether it's cancer or some other kind of crisis or challenge?
Yes, absolutely, Vicky. I really believe that it's in terms of supporting particularly men in your life, I think it's really important to understand what men are about. And I really believe that speaking with thousands of men and their caregivers in different forums, I feel like I want to talk to what I really believe is, I guess, the essence of men, and then kind of talk about how that fits in supporting us guys as well. I really did believe that us guys, we want to be free. We want to be free in expressing ourselves in an authentic way. And to me, free really is 4 things, and what's really an acronym. And the F of that part is the future. Because I really believe that for us guys, it's so important to think about the future, to make plans, to feel like you're going somewhere. And that often gets thrown out the window when you are going through a difficult time, whether that's cancer, whether that's mental health, whether that's divorce, whatever else that might be, whether that's depression. We feel like there's nothing to look forward to. And that's why it is so vital when you have a man in your life to be talking about the future, to be talking about making plans, to be talking about what we can do together, whether to maybe have any plans about travel, or be it renovating the kitchen, or whatever else may be. I think it's so vital to make plans so that we have something that we can look forward to. especially if we're going through a difficult time. I really believe that the future is so important. The second thing I believe it's so important is to feel ready. I think us guys, we want to feel ready. We kind of see that in all of our heroes, whether they are, the first responders, whether they are, firemen, whether they are, our army. They're kind of ready for things, and we want to feel ready in whatever way makes sense for you. But we kind of lose that when you're going through a really tough time. But I believe that we can help ourselves to feel more ready, and that's true for our caregivers. We can help guys to feel more ready by, especially when you're going through a challenging time, be it cancer or be it mental health, to feel more prepared. And that is, I know that one thing I started doing that in my cancer journey was coming up to one of my specialists with a list of questions that I would ask them ahead of time. In fact, that's something that I have a free resource on my Simplify Cancer website, which is, First Oncologist Checklist. Is when you come in with questions and you can write down answers, you can follow it up. It's so vital because it gives you that sense of being prepared. You kind of know what you're doing. You don't just feel like you're like rabbit in the headlights and all of these things that can happen to you. And so I think it's so important for caregivers to encourage us guys who don't typically do this unless we're kind of nudged into that direction to really, take a step forward and get prepared for in whatever way that is possible. So that's, I think, feeling ready is really important. That's the second part of free, I think. The third part of free is to feel essential. All of us guys, we want to feel needed. We want to feel important. And maybe we all know that with people that we care about, with our friends, with our partners, with our families, where I think it's so important to have those reminders. And I think for our caregivers to include, even much more so maybe than otherwise, to include, men even more so in making decisions, asking their opinion, getting them involved in some way. I know sometimes it may feel counterintuitive because sometimes you want to feel the person leave them to their own devices, but I think it's so important to include people even more in decision-making and conversations so that they feel that sense of belonging and being a part of something greater. And the last E, I think, is feeling enough. Because so often in life, there's this kind of expectations and pressure to be a certain way or to do certain things. And I think it's so vital to, doing that for one another and making each of us feel like we're enough, to making, time to listen, making, time to praise someone, right? Because if you, even if you say something like, what, I really appreciate how you deal with things. I know it's tough for you, but it means a lot to me that you're going through this. You're doing this for us, and you're doing this best you can. Something as simple as that can make such a tremendous difference. And we never get tired of hearing it, right? It's kind of like it's like if someone you love says to you, I love you. You're not going to be like, hold on a second, didn't she say that already? Like we love hearing that. So I think hearing praise, hearing good things about us, I think that's really powerful. And I think that can also be supportive. I think those really four things can really go a long way. Talking about the future and making plans, feeling ready to getting prepared for in any way for the challenges that we face, whether that's with questions, whether that's doing our research. I think that's really important. And then also to feel essential, to be more included in opinions and situations and conversations so that you feel you're a part of something. And fourth, is like we talked about, feeling enough, feeling that there's no pressure, that you can be yourself, and praising you even more so, when the going gets tough.
Excellent, and a really easy way to remember that, your acronym FREE. As we're coming to the end of this talk, I'm gathering that what we've heard from you today is just a tiny little drop in the ocean of what you have come to understand over your journey and how you can help other people get through their own journey. And what drove you to actually write the books and to do your podcasting? Was that kind of a journey in itself to allow you to be free as like a catharsis in your challenge?
Absolutely, Vicky. I think the podcast came about is I felt also pretty lost in my time of going through cancer. And I knew that listening to podcasts was one of the things that I was able to do when I wasn't feeling that well. So I thought, why don't I start my podcast interviewing kind of experts around oncology and also people who've been through cancer to share their advice of what helped them. And then people could listen in and almost be like a part of the conversation. And that's kind of what led to it. I mean, the first person I interviewed was my oncologist. So it was definitely a journey of discovery of what's right for me, but in a way that hopefully is for other people. That's how Simplified Cancer got started. And for me, this book, really how that got started, as I was really inspired by a conversation, Vicky, that I had with my grandma at the start of the pandemic, who is like 96 years old, and she's like the most incredible, the wisest person I have ever met. And so I was talking to my grandma, and we're talking about the pandemic, and she said, I experienced something similar. And she told me about the time in the 1930s where she lived in Ukraine. Well, that's where I'm from. She lived in Ukraine, and she was a 19-year-old medical student. And at the time, there was a typhus epidemic, which I did know killed like more than 3 million people in Ukraine. It was insane. I didn't know anything about it. So she was sent as a 19-year-old student to some remote mountain village to look after the people, right? And it was really tough because people were getting sick. My grandma nearly died from typhus herself, and there wasn't any food to go around. And there was, and by the way, then they had this Red Army guards posted around the village with a shoot on sight policy, right, as quarantine measures, which kind of made me appreciate lockdowns we had, and so she was telling me about all of this weekend. I was like, Grandma, I mean, is this thing for real? I mean, how did you guys get through this? And she said to me, you know what? We had hope. We had hope that things are going to be different. We had hope that one day things are going to change. And that just struck such a chord with me, because I realized that hope has been such a part of my life, whether that's going through cancer, dealing with mental health, whether that's dealing with all the other nasty things that life throws at you. And so that's why I kind of decided to put all of this kind of practical things that I felt worked for me, and like the line of control, that's an exercise from this book. And I wanted to put all of that in there, and that's what I wanted to kind of share with the world in a way that I hoping would be helpful to someone going through a difficult time as well.
That's amazing, and your grandma's story sounds unbelievable, and I'm glad you were able to speak to her to capture that history. It's vital that we learn from the past, because that's how we'll deal with the future. We talked a lot about specifically cancer diagnosis, but can you talk a little bit about how people who aren't necessarily going through cancer can take elements of your podcasting, your book, your story to help themselves?
Yes, absolutely. I think, it's so important, I believe, that a huge part of finding hope, I believe, is for ourselves, is to reconnect with something that feel almost greater than you. I really believe that the more and more I speak to people who've been through difficult circumstances, in many different ways. And this is something that I've noticed as a pattern, Vicky, in different countries, in different ages, in different stages of life. One thing that helps people is being involved, whether that's volunteering, whether that's some kind of a project, whether that's something to do in your community. Stepping out in a way helps you to deal with your own struggle. It helps you to heal inside, but it also takes that focus away from your own troubles and challenges, and kind of transfers some of that focus towards the people that you care about, whether that's people in your community who have been affected by floods, whether that's people who may have experienced homelessness, in whatever way that makes sense for you. I really believe it's so vital to be able to give something of yourself, be able to give your time, to be able to give your energy, to be able to give whatever it is that you can afford to give. And I think that helps us heal, and it also helps us to move forward.
That's brilliant. Just before we wrap up today, please share with the viewers how they can follow you or find out how to purchase your books.
Yes, absolutely. I think the best way would be to, anything around cancer is to go to simplifycancer.com. That's why the podcast, that's why my first book, Simplify Cancer, lives on, and that's simplifycancer.com. And this book, and to check out my other podcast, which is more about personal growth and self-help, that sort of thing. And this book, Finding Hope, and that is at powertobehappy.com. That's powertobehappy.com.
Thank you so much for your time and insights today. It's been a very powerful message to hear that you don't have to go through something alone. Men can find support with their friends, family, loved ones, and the first, most important thing is to reach out at that very early point in the crisis to avoid the worry that can really drag you down. Thank you so much for your insights today, and perhaps one day we'll be able to meet you in the flesh. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Vicky. I really appreciate it.